right, greetings everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Docs and a Grunt. As always, I am Luis Fonseca, your doc number one, 22 years Navy Hospital Corpsman, retired, was awarded the Navy Cross. Tonight's episode is going to be a little bit different, so I'm kicking off a little bit different, guys. Um, Tonight's episode, we will discuss what it feels like 20 years have passed by since a major conflict and you've lost friends or brothers, sisters out on those battlefields. So, like I said, I'm Luis Fonseca, Doc number one, Navy Cross recipient. Nate, won't you take it next, please?
Yep, I'm Nate Emery. 22 years in the Marine Corps, 12 as an enlisted Marine and 10 as an officer, and I've been in DOD as a contractor or civilian since that time. And next is Doc Barry.
I'm Andrew Barry, also known as Doc Barry. I am a psychologist and psychoanalyst, and I specialize in working with veterans and first responders battling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Take it away, Luis.
Okay, so yeah, so on March 23rd of 2003, for y'all that haven't read our bios or know much about us, I was involved in what was initially called the invasion of Iraq, which later on, and they correct me if I'm getting stuff wrong here, because I was just a young sailor back then. So me thinking about history or writing things down or what operation this was or that wasn't even a thought process for me back then. So, when Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off on March 20th, and we got the word, we heard it over the shortwave radios, the little wind-up radios, right? And over the BBC, that President Bush had declared major conflict. I think it's the words that he used back then, major conflict with Iraq, and we're to push forward. Everything's fun. Like the old saying goes, everything's all fun and laughs and funs, or whatever that saying. I can't even speak tonight, guys. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think I'd get this. I'd get this flustered over something I've spoken about so much.
Yeah, but now you got to think about it.
Yeah. So it's it's all fun and games until shit hits the fan, right? And I tell this story often is we're so young and ready to get payback for whatever you feel the Iraq war was or wasn't. I'm not here for politics. But when 9/11 happened, yeah, I mean, I believe every Marine Corps unit and every Navy corpsman that was with Marines as their company commander, when are we going over there and sending that attack back? And when we finally got the word in December, I think it was like December 28th, that we're recalling everyone back off of leave. And on January 7th, we're on board a ship to go to Kuwait to stage for the war. So there was a lot of us that were young and dumb, and you feel invisible, so you're like, fuck yeah, let's go to war. Let's take this over to them. They brought it to us. Let's take it to them. Cliche sayings are so popular for a reason, right? Because they're true. They're embedded in truth, and it's everyone wants to do Rambo shit until it's time to do Rambo shit, right? And the majority of us, accomplish mission. There's, I've come to accept that men that we might consider coward on the battlefield that day, I've come to accept and have compassion for them, because personally for me, it's sometimes hard enough for me to enjoy life when we lost so many of our guys that day. But then to know if I would have cowered and not been there for them, I don't think I would have made it 20 years after. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely.
Like, one thing I've always told people, and I don't mean this in a negative way, because our military force is established for a reason, and that is to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, right? Um, Shit, I'm sorry. Where was I going with that?
You were talking about being young and what it's like to go into combat that first time, and possibly I think you were kind of talking about how
Oh,
some people are afraid.
yeah, yeah. So I have compassion for them because, like I said, one thing I've always kind of said was, regardless of your religious belief, mine is this: is that yes, there's one great creator. I am a Buddhist, um, but I do believe in one great creator, and I am just glad that on a day where, at that time frame in Iraq or wherever, there was a lot of destruction going on, I was used as an instrument to help bring as many of our brothers and sisters back home. Now, at that time, I was at an all male unit. Grunt units hadn't received females at all or anything. So it was just, 175, 180 of us guys that went up against like a 3,000 force. Now, I want people to understand this too, and I don't want to discredit anyone. So the Battle of An Nasiriyah encompasses Task Force Tarawa. So there was a lot of individual battles. But when most people think of the Battle of An Nasiriyah, they think of what is infamously now known as Ambush Alley, which is where we ran through, the gauntlet we ran through. And it was infamously given the name Ambush Alley because it was a perfect setup to run into a U-shaped ambush and get hit. You know, so like I said, when you're young and you're ready to take that fight back to them, once that first round cracks in your eardrum, and you know that war is real now, and you see the guy next to you go down and not get up. Um, like I said, after 20 years, I don't think I could have lived with myself if I knew that I had not performed my duties as well as I could have, right? So I'm just very glad that I've been able to, after 20 years, first and foremost, be more comfortable with who I am, be more comfortable with wearing this award, um, understanding that this award, even though I carry it, I still will always say it really belongs to the 18 men that we lost that day, 18 of our brothers, 18 husbands, fathers, brothers, uncles, whatever, they were to somebody's family, right? Even if it was just a friend, we talk about family, and in the military culture, we all know what it's like to build a family that's not made of blood or DNA. Um, but it's just, it's surreal. It's how time just flies. To think of, Michael Bitz was one of our Sergeant Michael Bitz was one of our assistant crew chiefs that passed away on March 23rd in the Battle of An Nasiriyah. He was one of my Amtrak Marines, so AAV Marines. And and to think his children were born, his youngest kids, youngest of four. He had four kids total. Two twins were the youngest. Um, they were born, I think, I want to say 2 weeks after he was KIA, killed in action. So these two two young children never got to meet their father, that a school on board Camp Lejeune is named after. The Bitz Intermediate School is
Wow.
named after him. And it's very fitting for Sergeant Bitz. Michael was very much a teacher. He was a mentor. He was a great leader. I've shared this story before on this podcast, and it's one of the best stories I love to share about Michael Bitz. Is when I went out on my first field op, and I listened to that dumb HM3 that told me, When the Marines tell you to do something, you tell them, nope, that's not my duty. I'm the doc. I don't do that. And went out on my first field up with that dumbass leadership mentality, right? Some third class telling me I'm a young E2. And we do, on the maintenance run, we do what is called an at halt. So I know sometimes my accent messes words up, but at halt, right? So in an at halt stop, you have a short one and a long one. So your short one for track vehicles is make sure there's nothing stuck in the tracks that will break it down. Make sure our fluids are good, and then we're taken right back off. In a long stop, that's where you lift up the plenum, which is kind of like the hood of the vehicle. You get in the engine, you take out the air pack, which is kind of like your air filter of a car, and you check all those stuff, your batteries, everything. So you're doing a long at halt check. We did a long at halt check, and Sergeant Bitz calls me up and says, "Hey Doc, get your butt up here." I was like, "All right." He didn't cuss. This guy that didn't cuss, he probably didn't even say "but." He probably said, "Hey Doc, get up here." Right? Very, very devout in his beliefs as a Christian, but a great leader. And so he said, "Hey, get up here." So I jump up there. He's like, "Help me open up the plenum." So we open it up, and he jumps down. And like I said, I've shared this story before, but to this day, it will always ring in my ears when people are like, "How can I be successful?" And I talk to people about becoming part of a team. It was because he taught me that. When I told him, Sergeant, I'm the corpsman. I don't check vehicles. I don't do that's not my job. And he jumped out of that engine compartment so quick and looked at me dead in the eye. It is like that because Nate, you know what it's like, right? When you live it, you know when you're a young nothing. And
I can feel the fear.
yes, right.
What was your pay grade at that time?
I was an E2. I've been in the fleet. I've been in the fleet all of 3 weeks.
Oh gosh!
Yeah.
And you're telling the sergeant that's not my job.
Right, because some shitty fucking leader, right? Some shitty HM3 E4 tells me, "Hey, tell the Marines that's not your job," and that made my first one so hard. But I'm also so very grateful that I was with Michael Bitz because, like I said, he jumped up there, and with the intensity that he got up there, I knew modified parade rest right away. He's like, "Doc," I said, "Yes, Sergeant." He goes, "Come here." "Yes, Sergeant." And I'm standing on top of a vehicle nonetheless, that modified parade rest. I'm like,
Sure.
"Yes, Sergeant." He's like, "Don't you ever say it's not your job." He goes, "You never know when you're going to need to know how to run this vehicle in order to pull your Marines out of death."
Yeah.
First field up. After that day, I never went to a unit and never said that's not my job. Everywhere I went to afterwards, it was my job to learn everyone else's job. And I think that's what made me highly successful and highly competent in teamworkship, was understanding the fact that we're all one team and we all have to work together to accomplish a mission, regardless of our rank, regardless of what medals we were on our chest or what branch of service we're part of. We're one team and we have to work cohesively to, meet these missions. And these are hard missions over the last 20 years, right? So Michael Bitz, just his leadership, sometimes I do get sad because how many young Marines and sailors could have used a leader like Michael Bitz,
Far too many.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A very and we're talking, this was the late 90s, early 2000s. So, excuse me right now, we're going to go back to that time frame. So calling a young man a pussy and a fucking suck it up was the way it was back then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But even he wasn't that way. He was, but he wasn't. Like, he would tell you to suck it up and go fuck off without saying those exact words.
He was tactful.
Yes, exactly.
He sounds like one of those Marines that people quietly, even if they won't admit it out loud, they aspire to be like that person.
100%. 100%. I mean, when we were in Kuwait, he started holding Bible reading classes. You know, not Bible reading, but Bible study in Kuwait before we
Yeah.
went into Iraq. That's the type of leader he was, right? The type of man. And then, you know, Corporal Kemafun, you know, Chuck, as we called him. I mean, what bigger of an impact can somebody give me in my life than to help me find a path on how not to suffer anymore? Corporal Chuck was the first one that embedded the idea of Buddhism into my thought back in 2000. I knew nothing about Buddhism. I was strict Catholic and then strict Jehovah's Witness. And if you were, well, when we're strict Catholic, right, is if you weren't Roman Catholic, you were going to hell, right, regardless of whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then when my parents became a Jehovah's Witness, then it's basically the same thing, except they believe that you'll just be dead, it'll never exist again, right? You know, if you're anything besides a Jehovah's Witness. So whatever. So I never knew too much about different religions growing up until I met Chuck. And one day I saw a red band underneath his uniform, and I was like, "Hey, Corporal, what's that?" And he goes, "Oh, shoot!" And he tucked, because we had sleeves up. It was summertime. He goes, "Oh, I'm a Buddhist," and he started talking about Buddhism. And when we were stationed in Kuwait, he spoke to me a lot about Buddhism too. And the crazy thing is what was it? 10 years after Iraq and after Michael and Chuck passed away, I had gotten my second DUI in the Navy, and I was looking at getting kicked out, and I got sent to an alcohol treatment program. And no bullshit, man, no lie, man. I have no reason to lie. When people talk about, I feel like I got a message from God, or I got a message from, you know, Jesus, or from a creator or whatever, right? Or I just got this,
Something divine.
yeah, in me, right? So they put me into a room, and these are 4-man rooms, right? I was still on active duty. I was an E6 at the time. So they treated me a little bit different than our veterans, right? Or our E1s or E2s that were there. They tried to keep me in just, even though it was a 4-person room, they tried to keep me by myself. You know, they were like, an Army Sergeant First Class, SF guy, came and shared a room with me like 2 weeks into my program. But anywho, every nightstand on those 4 beds had a Bible on them, except for mine. Mine, and I still have the book till this day, believe it or not, was The Life of Buddha and Who He Was. The only bed that had that book. And I was the one that was put in there.
Wow.
So I started reading it. And one thing I loved about Buddhism was, and Chuck would tell me this all the time, he's like, "Doc, let it go. Let the pain go." I'm like, "I'm not holding on to no pain." He goes, "Look at you. You are." "No, I'm not. I mean, I'm just tough and rrr." He's like, "Doc, you know, you're going to have to." And when I was in treatment, those words kept resonating as I read more and more about the canons of Buddhism, right? And the whole, yes, pain is inedible, but suffering is my choice. Unfortunately, it still took a little bit more time after that for me to get completely sober, and it took a suicide attempt for me to, like we like to say in the old school days, get my head out of my ass, right? But you know, it was him resonating in my head too, right? That led me to explore Buddhism more, and led me to this life that I lead now, that I love so much. You know, it's it hurts me to know that the world and those people's loved ones has missed out on such great humans for the last 20 years, when, you know, there's such shitty people in this world, right? You know, mass murderers and rapists and child molesters that should go get shot out of back at the courthouse, right? And these 2 men didn't come back, and that, you know, I'll admit that still pisses me off 20 years later, because life's not fair, and I wish it was, because then they'd be here. But that's where I have to rely on my beliefs rooted in Buddhism. to accept that pain, understand that you were there, but not to hold on to it anymore, not to allow it to drown me and suffocate me anymore, to acknowledge that the pain is there, to acknowledge that I had that experience with my brothers, that no, not all of us came back home cardinally, right? Not all of us came back home in our flesh, but everyone came back home, at least in my heart. And I carry those 18 men in my heart every day. People, I post a lot about Chuck and Michael Bitz because they were my AAV Marines. But the other 16 Marines were 1-2 Charlie Company Grunt Marines. I hadn't known until we started staging in Kuwait. So Corporal Glass, Corporal Meade, I remember them because those were the two amputees that I treated. But the other ones I don't remember by name because we had met them 2 weeks prior to the conflict, right?
Yeah.
But I can only imagine, like I said, it just pains me sometimes. 20 years have gone by. Yeah, it's the cliche saying. Sometimes it feels like it was just one duty station ago that I was at AAVs. That was a young E2, E3, E4 running around, doing, back-to-back deployments. But then there's days that my body reminds me very quickly that it has been 20 years, and but it comes with a lot of sacrifice, a lot, and that's what I think a lot of this generation is failing to see, is that becoming a military service member, making this a career, takes a lot of sacrifice, sometimes at the cost of missing an anniversary or a birthday or Christmas, sometimes at the cost of a limb or your eyesight, sometimes at the cost of your life. But it's a commitment that we made, and it's a commitment that we make to each other every day we put on that uniform and going to work. And that's what I tell a lot of people too, is every day you go into work, you need to ask yourself one thing. Have you done everything in your power to make your brother or sister confident in the facts that you will perform your duties when the time comes? Whether it's on the battlefield or here at home fighting injustice, it doesn't matter, right? You have to go every day setting that competency for your shipmates or your fellow devil dogs or soldiers, whatever service you're in, right? So that's another thing I started doing too was, okay, I'm an HM1 now, I'm an E6. Either I'm pick up E7 or not. But I thought, how can I, and I know that the Navy Cross kind of gave me a lot of street cred, as we used to say back in the day, street cred. But, I still would go in like, how can I ensure that my sailors trusted my leadership? Trusted.
You're humble.
Right. Yeah. So I always kind of knew that. And I attested to Michael Bitz and Corporal Chuck, they were both leaders of mine when I first joined the military. So Corporal Chuck, I mean, as young as
Corporal
he was.
Chuck,
Huh?
is that Chanawangsi?
Yeah, that's Chronological. So yeah, anytime I say Corporal Chuck, that's how we called him, Chuck, as Kemafum Chronological.
I remember him just because of the Thai last name and my mom being Thai.
Right. And he was and another fact about him was he was actually the first Buddhist service member to have a Buddhist funeral service at Arlington National Cemetery.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I didn't realize he was up here at Arlington.
Yes, he is up in Arlington. A matter of fact, like if you Google Corporal Chanawangsi or whatever, a lot of the pictures from his funeral, you'll see there's four Buddhist monks walking with the casket. So they intertwined both a Buddhist ceremony and a military ceremony for him. So he was the first one ever. And he has in Buddhism, we use a helm. It's an 8-point helm. It kind of like Christians use a cross, or Jews, is that the proper terminology? I don't want to disrespect anyone.
Yeah,
use
right.
the Star of David, right? And other religions use different whatchamacallit, symbols as well. So we used the helm and but anyways, I don't know where I was getting
So,
with that.
well, I mean, let me fill you in on something. I went up to Arlington for the first time in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
It was that first year that I was a single dad. My kids wanted to go up there, and I was like, well, they're like, don't you know anybody up there? And I'm like, well, that's the reason why I don't go up there. Like, is that, you know, can't bring myself to do it, even though I work right across the street. But
Right.
so we started going up there at least once a year. Sometimes it's on Veterans Day, sometimes on Memorial Day. And one of the times we went up there, as we were walking through, is at Section 60, I think, where all the OIF veterans
Yeah.
are at in Afghanistan. We were going through Section 60, and because some of the guys I've served with are there, and one of my kids had said, "What is this symbol?" And so I backtracked to where they're at, and I was like, "Oh, that's what Buddhists put on their graves," and it was Corporal Chuck's grave because his
Oh.
name stands out to me, and so his grave happens to be the one that my kids pointed out.
Wow.
So it's an interesting connection with him there.
Isn't it? And you know,
Yeah.
it's just that's the way the world is, right? You have all these connections intertwining throughout the whole universe.
Oh, get
You know,
this. So
and
another one of the Marines from 1-2, I think he would have been a second lieutenant at the time, Frederick Pokorny.
Pokorny, yeah, Pokorny Hall.
So Pokorny was, I didn't know him, but we went to OCS together.
Right, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, and then when I got to 29 Palms, it turned out that his college roommate was our supply officer.
Mm.
So he and I would talk about him a little bit. And he's from this town in Nevada. I want to say it's Tonopah. But it's also the same little town that one of the elders at my church, who's a Marine, his wife is from that same town.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just, so all these little connections everywhere. It's just, it's crazy.
It is. You know, and so like I said, that's why I post a lot about Michael and Chuck is because they were my AV Marines, but I don't want to count the 16 other infantry guys that, you know, unfortunately paid the ultimate sacrifice. And then obviously, you know, we have other operations within the Battle of An Nasiriyah, like on the Southern Bridge where now retired Sergeant Major Justin LaHue was awarded his Navy Cross. So when we talk about the Battle of An Nasiriyah, yeah, there was different battles and different parts of that city going on at that time. I just happened to be involved and, you know, was unfortunately considered one of the deadliest or bloodiest battles the Marine Corps has been in as far as amphibious operations are concerned since Vietnam. We hadn't lost any AAVs since Vietnam, and on that day alone we went in with 12 vehicles. I think we came out with 7, I think something like that, and 18 less able men because they were KIA, and then probably another 24 wounded that we had to medevac and get out. And we're actually considered combat ineffective for 72 hours, and they gave us 72 hours to get vehicles back up, to bring men from the rear up to the front lines with us and push forward. And I remember being a young E2 and I rode in Gunny's track, so most meetings just always happen at Gunny's track, right? And so, you know, these very, is stoic the right word? Like very stoic man, you know?
Yeah, you present a strong front,
Right.
regardless of what you're feeling at the time. So
Yes.
yeah.
These very stoic men that are about to lead us into battle again, right after March 23rd, like seriously contemplating, you know, hey, captain, or, you know, who else was there? The battalion colonel, you know, lieutenant colonel, and gunnies and all them. Hey, gentlemen, so are we going to push to be combat effective, or are we going to stand down and get sent back to the rear? And I think being not part of those conversations, but being so close to those conversations at such a young age in my career, helped me out as well too when I became a leader and having to send men or women into harm's way. I saw the genuine caringness of them and the genuine fear that we could lose more men like this. But then you also see the side of these men where they think tactfully and they know that mission has to push forward because this is what we do as Marines
Yeah.
and as Navy corpsmen and as soldiers and whatever, right? And how hard those decisions are made. And I'm glad I was exposed to that, like I said, at such a young part of my career because, you know, I've sent men out the front lines and they have not returned, you know. But I also live with that kind of comfortably as well because I know that in my heart I did everything I could to train those Marines or sailors. But when you step on an IED, no training in the world is going to matter, right? Just like those AVs, a 500-pound bomb drops on them, everyone in that vehicle is dead. There's nothing anyone can do about them. But in my mind, I carried that guilt for, 17 years, guys, you know, and been 5 years sober now, 5 years. I would say it's going to be 5 years this July since my suicide. So 5 years since that. I'm seeing life in a much better light, you know. It's taken a lot of work to get here. I don't regret the 22 years at all. I know there's some podcasts or videos that I've made that you could kind of see like, man, is Luis really pissed off that he did 22 years? And no, I'm not. Am I angry at those times when I make those videos? For sure. But I do not regret the 22 years that I gave in service to this nation and in service to my fellow brothers and sisters across this world. Because it's made me the man that I am today, and I'm very proud of the man I have become today. Doc, Barry, I'm sorry, you were going to ask something or say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw something in here. For anybody who's watching this now or will watch it down the road, this is part of the therapeutic process. It was to always memorialize the dead because it makes sure that they are never forgotten. It gives meaning to their service. And Luis, it gives meaning to yours too. Now, if
Thank
you're
you.
up to it and if you can find the full list right nearby, you've mentioned Corporal Chuck and Michael Bitz. I remember one video you did where you read the names of all of them.
Correct.
You
That was
lost
last
on
year
that
for
day.
on the
Yeah,
19th
I don't know
anniversary.
if you're up to it, if it's doable for what we're doing now, to mention them all again as part of your own recovery process, or if my head's up my ass, just tell me.
No, 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 no. A matter of fact, I am pulling up their list right now.
Okay. And while that's being pulled up, the the sense of loss, the first that you were talking about X number of
Mhm.
minutes ago, the first thing I could think of was the saddest words of tongue or pen are those that say what might have been. I can't
Mhm.
put it any better than that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nick. You had a thought on that?
Yeah, if you're still looking for that, I was going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
say
Go
it's
ahead. Yeah.
like I don't think people when they talk to a vet from day to day, they tend to think that what they're seeing is the way you feel.
Mhm.
That's an indicator of how well you are, you know. And I wanted to give an example to people because just what you've shared with us today, while I know bits and pieces of it, and you've mentioned little things here and there over the past year now that we've known each other, this is the first time that I've ever heard the story in chronological order, you know, and that's in a and I'm thinking about how veterans will usually talk around parts of service and the
Uh-huh.
hard things, right? So when you're telling family about it or you're telling friends, they can't see the emotional part of it because you've learned how to talk about it matter of factly and not touch the nerves as you
Oh
do it.
yeah.
And just watching you here tonight talking to us, where you're actually getting into the feelings and you're getting into details, I can see the difference and I can see that line. I can see what side of that fine line you're on tonight while you're
Yeah.
talking to us. And I'm hoping that people who know you but might not know you from, the military service side, will be able to see that today and recognize that too. And people can take that, forward in their lives with other veterans and realize, yeah, somebody might seem like they're completely functional and untouched by what happened in their service, but usually that's wittingly, that's done with effort.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I have, like you said, there's I have told I wouldn't say the story, but my memory and recollection of Ambush Alley so many times that, in a sense, you're absolutely right. There is a way that, depending on who I'm speaking to or with, how I will talk about that day. And yeah, even with you gentlemen, like you said, Nate, today's the first day that you've actually ever heard me talk about it in a chronological order. And it's and that's hard because that's
It's like a reliving.
yeah, and I don't want to take away from other conflicts, because I've been involved in different conflicts and I've lost other great Marines and sailors, and I'm not saying that that doesn't affect me, but it goes to the old saying that Doc Barry always tells us, right? Is the first wound is always the deepest. And
First cut's the deepest.
yeah, and those were my first casualties. They were, my brothers. They
And and to be fair to yourself, I know everybody else watching and anybody who served would tell you the same thing. That the fact that it was your first isn't the only thing that made it so hard. I think you'd be hard pressed to find very many people, alive today who have lost so many people in one day.
right.
I mean, it was, on top of it being your first cut, it was an extremely deep cut.
Yes.
It's,
It's funny that you mentioned that because Adrian Walden, who's a corpsman out there with us, he's a friend of mine on Facebook. When I put up there, I have a new, what's it called, that home page, or the back part of your profile picture, but the back part?
kind of the wallpaper.
Yeah, whatever it's called, yeah. I had
banner.
the banner I'd posted up there about Chuck and Bitz, and I'm going to do one for the Battle of An Nasiriyah with all the guys' pictures and names on them. That's why I said, I can pull up the list. I'm already working on that. When I posted that, he said, something about, we're so young, and how to talk about something about, I forgot what he said. Here, hold on. But he said something along the terms as, talk about one hell of a day, or something like that. And I said, not just that. I said, but okay. So he says, that was a crazy day. We were some boot HMs. What a way to get our feet wet. And I said, shit, bro, talk about trial by fire, because that's really what it was, man. It was, I mean, we, like I said before, I joined the Navy in 1999. There was nothing going on that I knew about. So I had you don't have an idea of besides Rambo movies, right? And you quickly learn that that's not the way it goes. And
Lots of bad examples.
yes, exactly. And now, on my Word documents, I can't find the freaking list, of course. But yeah. What other questions do you have for me, guys?
Well, let me throw in something else. As far as today, what Nate was saying, you were attaching emotions to the story told chronologically. And you're going to get so sick and tired of hearing me say this throughout the years or the decades, as Nate's heard me say it. But folks, there is nothing whatsoever wrong with showing emotions, okay?
Oh.
Because all of those emotions communicate one thing, and that is what you're saying is, I love you all and I miss you all terribly. You cannot go wrong with that. You cannot go wrong. And if somebody doesn't get it, just be yourself and emote anyway. And why? Because it's honest and it's real.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. The I don't know if it's the times we're in now or it's just American culture being changed and changing by successive wars. But it seems now that to me that all the civilians all get it. They might not understand it intimately, but they know enough that they've got a respect for it. And aside from the odd assholes out there, no one's going to question or challenge anybody on it. I found it's other veterans who either don't have a similar experience, or they're those people who are just extremely resilient, and have just they either really weren't affected by it, which happens, and or they're people who haven't embraced it yet and are denying it. But it seems to me those are the places where I see the challenges that come up. I think I shared with you, Doc Barry, that I was stopped in church one day by a fellow Mogadishu veteran. I mean, he was a pilot, but when he was commenting, because I told him how we'd started the webcast, and he's like, "Yeah, but don't you think a lot of veterans?" And I'm not going to have his exact words, but it's the words to the effect of, "Don't you think a lot of veterans just need to let go?" You see these guys wearing their military T-shirts and their 511 jeans and stuff, and they've been out for years. And I was trying to explain to him like that should indicate to you that how deep that is for them. And then he walked away, and my son kind of looked at me. He's like, "Dad," he puts his hand out like this. What am I wearing? Black, veteran shirt, and 511 jeans. But I don't think he realized that I was wearing exactly what he was saying when he said it.
Gotcha.
And we're on good terms and everything too, but it was an indicator to me of how it's just some veterans just experience it differently, or have completely different takes on it.
Right.
Hopefully it's not because they're denying anything.
And for those who have lost, as Louise has lost, and profoundly so, as I say in the paper that you and I have presented now 16 times, time stops for some when they see that level of trauma out in the battlefield. I spoke with a guy who's a retired master gunnery sergeant about how when you lose somebody on the battlefield, the age you are to a certain extent, time stops. And he said, I've never thought of it that way before, but now that you mention it, I still feel like part of me is still 17 years old.
And I think that's why maybe talking that way, Doc Barry, is why sometimes it feels like it was just one duty station ago that I was right there with Michael and Chuck, working on the AVs. And there's days like today that it definitely does feel 20 years ago for sure. I definitely, I feel old now for sure, 100%. Not as far as like old and frail, but the body's beat up, right? The body reminds you of time.
It's a good example, Doc.
Right. The
Just
body
getting over his COVID.
Right.
Yep.
The body reminds you of time, and but it's that's one of my biggest issues still that I have a hard time dealing with, that I need to bring up to my counsel. I'm glad we're talking about this. Is maybe that's a little bit of the thing that I have a hard time letting go of, is the what could have been, the Chuck and Bitz, the Picorni family. Who else do I know? The Garcia family. Right off the top of my head, I'm trying to list the names. But and I've met a lot of these families, and they have their closure already. I mean, some of their own kids have come up to me and have said, "Thank you for trying to do everything you could for my dad," or the ones that their dads did come home back, like, "Thank you for bringing my dad back home." And their families have had closure, and it's maybe I'm just needing to find my closure with that, because like I said, it saddens me to know that this world has missed out of 20 years of Michael Bitz and Kamafun Chanawangsi, because to me they were just such great men and leaders that, you know, I feel that this world was robbed of those two men and the beauty that they could have brought to this world. And so maybe that's part of the closing that I need to get over, right? I never thought of it
Well,
that way, but
you you never get over it, but you try to work through it,
right.
right? Because those memories aren't going to ever go away, man. I mean, a good friend of mine, he used to always refer to the time in the field. He's like, okay, now it's all about farting and laughing and making a map. You know? And we used to say it all the time. Just, what are you guys doing? Just farting and laughing and making a map.
Yeah.
You know, just screwing around. And, you know, so you had that kind of time with them, and then it just stops, you know. And like you said, like, yeah, they've worked through their stuff, you know, and are moving on with their lives. You've moved on with your life too. I mean, look at the things you've done since then, right? But the difference is that you have it all burned into your memory in a different way, you know. It's burned into their memory in the way they found out about it, but it's burned into your memory as it actually happened,
Right.
you know. And in that memory, it's not just thoughts and visions. People don't understand. It's sounds and smells too.
Yeah.
So
And it's crazy that you mentioned that, because I don't know if y'all remember me telling y'all just a couple of podcasts ago that for the first time in 20 years, I've had two now PTSD responses due to smell, you know? And I've never had that. My whole, like, I always was like, no, it's just guilt. It's guilt ridden. I don't have PTSD. It's guilt ridden. It's guilt ridden. And I'm not going to lie, even for a long time, like, it's kind of like wanting to compare one person's cancer versus another one's, right? Who has the worst cancer? I would be like, I don't have PTSD because I'm not as bad as somebody else. Well, you know what? I did have PTSD. I just didn't want to accept that diagnosis. I just kept saying, no, it's just guilt. No, I'm just, you know, it's Mexican culture. Well, you always drink for every day, you know, whatever, right?
oh, it's because of my bad childhood.
yeah. But who knows, you know?
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. You know, those times are engraved in my memory until, and that's why I tell people sometimes, and I'll share this with you all too. One of, I wouldn't say my biggest fears, but one of just like a scary thought, like I hope this never happens to me, is, and for anyone whose family does go through this, I don't mean any disrespect because I am very naive on this, so please feel free to call me out and correct me, but Alzheimer's, you know, I that's one of the things, like, to grow older and to start to forget people in your life or things in your past, right? Because I don't, you know, I would love to hopefully take all these memories with me to the next life or whatever is after us, after this one, right? But at least until the day I take my last breath, I would hope to keep those memories with me because, like you said, it helps keep those 18 men alive.
It's interesting that you talked about the memories because yeah, I've brought up a few times talking about, you know, how the hippocampus, the amygdala, work basically against the prefrontal cortex, right? Your two primitive brains, two parts of your primitive brain work against your modern brain. And then there's the something I've been reading about a lot lately, the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and amygdala, the way those react to trauma. And we know that those actions work against your brain, right? So we know now that when they do the brain scans, they can see PTSD, they can see lesions, they can see plaque. And when Doc Barry and I were, you know, down there at a Renaissance weekend, one of the, I was glad Doc went to it too, because a lot of times we have different interests in these other side meetings they have. And I saw this one, it was on Alzheimer's and aging. And I was like, I want to go to that one because the similarities between Alzheimer's, dementia, and basically PTSD brain to me are like undeniable. And I was listening to them talking about the advances and how they're working with it. And I had asked them, I said, do you guys ever share along with the people that are working with veterans for PTSD and what's happening with their brains. Because if you guys were not saying Alzheimer's and you said PTSD instead, this would be there'd be nothing wrong with the way you're presenting it. So,
Right.
to me, it comes across the same. And I was amazed when they said no, not at all. And I was just like, but the upside of that is that as they make, I think, as they make leeway, with Alzheimer's, and are able to figure out how to reduce or get rid of the lesions and the plaque, and how your body fights your brain. I'm thinking that veterans are going to benefit from it in the same way.
Yeah.
But
Louise, for what
losing
it's
the memory
worth,
sucks.
for what it's worth, Louise, if that's one of your biggest fears, is contracting, or whatever the proper term is, Alzheimer's, while you still have all your brain cells, start working in your copious free time. Finish your memoirs, and that way your memories will be eternal. And when those memoirs are finished, I want an autographed copy.
Of course, yeah. But it's just like I said, 20 years. You both gentlemen are parents as well, so those years go by in the blink of an eye. Next thing you know, you're rolling over out of bed, and we're losing hair, going gray and all that stuff, right? And it's like those years just went by so quickly, and I've learned, for all of y'all out there in the audience that are maybe currently suffering in a little bit of silence, or are speaking up about your mental health struggles or whatnot, I have to give testimony to the fact that talking about it and feeling your emotions, for me personally, has been the best therapy. Medications have helped stabilize me for sure. That includes even self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. That's why I did it, because it allowed me a certain sense of not having to feel those bad feelings.
Short-term relief.
Right. But once I had my suicide in 2018, and I said, fuck it, I'm alive for a reason. Let me start being honest about all my feelings, and not caring about who thought I was strong or weak or a good leader or a bad leader because I was showing these emotions, but just caring about the fact that I wanted to stay alive for my family and my junior sailors. It gave me such a liberating feeling. I mean, I talk so freely now about my feelings. I'm not afraid to cry in front of the camera. If that's the emotion that's really coming up, it's genuine. I'm not afraid to laugh while we're talking about, us losing 18 men 20 years ago. And some people might not understand why I laugh about that right now. But you know what? Because I know that those 18 men wouldn't want to change the outcome. Although I would love to change the outcome and switch places with them, I can almost guarantee you those 18 men would all say, fuck no, you all stay alive, we're dead, go on, keep pushing forward, I'm almost positive, but, there's still part of me that selfishly would like to replace one of them, right? Because that negative talk about, who we are or whatnot. What's up, Doc?
At least, did you ever... first of all, did you ever see Saving Private Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The scene, as soon as you said that came to mind was when Tom Hanks' character, Captain Miller,
I already know what scene you're talking about.
Yeah. He looks at Private Ryan and says, "Earn this."
Oh, that part. Okay. I thought you.
This.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought he was going to the grave scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one I thought when he looked back towards his wife. That's the part. And yeah. I've done the same with Christina. I've told her, I said, please tell me I have lived a life worth their sacrifice. Because sometimes I don't feel like I lived honorably for their sacrifice. And that hurts too. I've been NJP'd. I've been a drunk. I so
I don't
sometimes
think
when I
they
so sometimes when
wouldn't
I
fault
see
you,
those
man.
posts, like live a life worth their sacrifice, I don't feel like I have.
They would understand, man. They wouldn't blame you.
And guess what, Luis? What you're doing right now, and speaking for both of us, thank you for allowing us, Nate and I, to help you live a life worth of their sacrifice because of what we're doing here. People will see you, what you just were doing. They will see you're doing. They'll see us. More discussion will be stimulated. More suicides will be prevented.
Yeah.
And I am convinced, you guys, that we are saving lives with this podcast. I honestly believe that.
I know that
And
this
I can't,
podcast has saved my life for sure. Because I wish I could say in 5 years I haven't thought about suicide, but I have. I wish I could say in
Yeah.
5 years I haven't thought about picking up the bottle or remembering what it was like 15 years ago, the first time I shot up heroin, to forget about these fucking demons.
well, we're saving lives. So yes, you are living a life worthy of their sacrifice. And Nate and I will see to it that it continues to the best of our ability.
Yeah,
If
there's
you
no
let it,
reason why
if you let
we
us.
don't stop this. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. This is as much of a staple of my week as it is for you guys.
You know, but
I'm-
yeah, you know, like I said, this is some of the hard things that I still fight with every day. You know, it's because we've said it before, you know, on whether it was in private or in podcasts or whatever, that everyone knows social media, you only post the best of your life, right? So you always think life is always great. So
What's it mean when we don't post?
yeah, exactly. So when you see someone that
Compost.
yeah, so when you see someone that posts every day 4 or 5 times a day, and then all of a sudden they're radio silent for a week, that's when you need to start questioning, right? Reaching out to your brothers and sisters. But anywho, you know, social media makes life seem perfect and pretty all the time, and it's not that way for any of us. None of us. I don't care who you think has a great life, you know, or who you want to be like in reality world, right? Reality TV. Who are your heroes in reality TV? And I hate that fucking term hero, and I'll talk to you guys about that here in a minute. But you know, none of them have a perfect life. None of us have it, you know, and if anything, like you guys said, this, you know, whatever veteran, whatever first responder thinks that they're the only ones that have these thoughts or that have attempted suicide and survived it, and still feel less than. I mean, look at here. I'm sitting here on this screen still questioning 20 years after the fact of what put me in the history books of the United States Navy and America, because I'm the only living U.S. Navy sailor from the Iraq War with the Navy Cross. The only other guy was a Navy SEAL, and he got his posthumously. So even with knowing all of that, you know, none of us live a life that's perfect. A lot of people might think, oh man, he has a handle on things. He hasn't been drinking for 5 years. He's talking about, you know, PTSD, mental health, but it's still an everyday struggle for me. Every day, it's like Doc Barry likes to always say, PTSD is an ever-moving target that you have to readjust your aim of fires every morning that you wake up, because you don't know which route that enemy's coming at. Um,
And the wolf is always at the door.
yeah, no, for sure, always.
Yeah, it kills me. The first time I heard somebody say it was when Doc Beer and I were up in Boston. When we were up at was it Boston Analytical, and somebody was talking about their program at the VA. I don't want to name what state it was in, but they were visiting in Boston, and they work at one of the VAs in the country, and talking about how they had this high rate of success of curing veterans of PTSD. And I remember just thinking to myself, I'm like, what? Like, just because they're not showing up anymore doesn't mean they're cured.
Yeah, what was it?
Uh-huh.
Are you talking about the one that said like 80% success rate?
No, so that link I sent today, that's a whole separate one. I was just
Yeah.
amazed to see that one pop up today, because
Go
where
ahead.
that person works is the place where I was looking at going to get my brain scan, but they wanted, they wanted the $7,500 up front because they got too many experiences with TRICARE not paying for it. But when I saw that on there, I was like, well, I'm definitely not going to go there for counseling. That's
Right,
for
right.
sure. Because 80% success rate
Yeah.
over the 20 years of curing people of PTSD. Now, it didn't say curing in there, but she may as well have.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she said like no more patients with symptoms of PTSD or something like that.
Yeah.
Which, and that's why I stated my question on there to Doc Barry, asking for his educational and fundamental knowledge of his area of expertise. Is, from my understanding, in order for you as a licensed clinical psychologist or social worker, or like, don't you have to have peer reviews and IRBs and all that before you can actually say, hey, yeah, our research shows that we have a percentage rate of success, right? Like, you can't just
Well,
falsely claim.
see, that's for research, okay, where there's a lot of fingers in the pie and a lot of eyes on the final product.
peer review.
Yeah, peer reviews and whatnot. However, even though it may not be ethical, or to say nothing of legal, when you're out in private practice hanging your own shingle, that's where you get some of this really unusual success rates
Right,
reported.
right.
I don't. Sorry, blow your eardrums out. Sorry about that. But speaking, for all the years that I've been doing this, it's not about cure. Because when I think of cure, that means it all goes away.
Yeah.
Bullshit. It never goes away.
Yeah.
It's management, okay? It's helping the patient become a student of their own PTSD, which means understanding it, tracking the moods, monitoring their medication, accepting the fact that life just got a lot harder, okay? But also part of the therapeutic process, part of the healing process, if you will, is to, as you have said in No Shame Warrior, is to get them to accept emotionally, and not just as an intellectual exercise, that the diagnosis does not have to define them, and that there can be life after, well, so to speak, in addition to PTSD. But it's going to require a creative process. It's going to require a certain amount of courage to try different things to find your own path,
Right.
but also an acceptance that this thing is not going to go away, but it can be managed. And even though you may not have gotten out of the service not knowing who you are anymore, there is still time to figure out who you are 2.0, so to speak.
For sure.
But Doc Barry, my EEO office wants me to recertify my PTSD.
It's,
I'm not kidding.
Oh, those
I'm
guys
not
are
kidding.
certifiable. Oh, I know. And those guys are certifiable, all right. Pun intended.
I was like, here's some links to the National Institute of Health. Let me know when you find where they've figured out how to cure this.
right.
Yeah.
So you're,
I can wait.
Doc Barrett, I mean, I will, in this podcast, use you a little bit more in the doctor scope of things, right? Because I'm not a doctor, but I absolutely agree with you. And I'm not saying that to, Luis Fonseca gives credibility to a doctor. No, you're the the psychologist. But it does. I agree with that. That statement. That shit, man. See, why does this keep happening?
It's a short-term memory.
Yeah,
People don't understand.
it's hard. It's hard. But no, to the fact of what we're just talking about. Your
Like,
diagnosis.
You give them credence. Yeah.
That we give them what?
Oh, the fact that you were agreeing with him, you said you didn't want to make it seem like, oh, well, Doc Barry is now credible because
Oh yeah,
Doc Fonseca has deemed him.
yeah. But
an
what did you
expert.
say before that, Doc Barry? What was it?
Talking about how post-traumatic stress disorder is not curable.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about management, becoming a
Yeah.
student of it, taking responsibility for it, understanding it, monitoring medications, but also not letting it define who you are for the rest of your
Yes.
life. It can affect the rest of your life, and it's going to, but it doesn't have to define it. But it requires a
Right.
huge amount of work in the healing and the therapeutic process to figure out who you are. When you get when the guys get out of the service and they say, "I have no idea who I even am anymore," it's my job to help
Yeah.
them figure out who they want to be.
Right. Right.
Who they are 2.0. That's what I was trying to say.
Gotcha.
I was not laughing at that. What I was laughing at, I was just thinking, it's like, where are we going to be in 10 years when Luis and I have lost even more of our capability with our short-term memories, and we don't have a guest? It's basically going to be you trying to help us remember what the hell we were talking about.
Well, you know what? Hopefully in 10 years, we will have a nice foundation where people can go and heal, where we have new, young, enthusiastic human beings that want to help other humans heal. And when our time comes to pass, we can look at the horizon and say, kind of what we're talking about right now, and say, I truly did live a life worth of service, and quietly pass on from this world to whatever comes next. And to not define us, with, like you said, PTSD or depression, anxiety, whatever it is we feel. And I have several friends that are amputees, and I kind of, I don't want to compare, but maybe, is it analyze? Is that the correct term that I should use for this? Kind of like an amputee, I would assume. I'm not an amputee, but I would assume, you coming home double amputee, not only are you dealing with the PTSD, but like Doc Barry said, they have to cope with the fact that now they are men and women without legs. So are you going to be an amputee, or are you still going to be Luis that just happens to be an amputee? Is how how I read it when you talk that way, Doc Barry, is like, so Luis, do you want to be Luis that, has PTSD and has, all these emotions, and you're a human being, or do you want to be a PTSD person? That's how I see it. Does that make,
I'm hoping that my kids and everybody else who ever knew you, Luis, remember you as, that's Doc Fonseca, the guy that helped other people with their PTSD.
Oh, thank you, brother. Yes, I'm hoping
Nice.
So,
That's what I'm hoping.
Thank you.
Well stated.
It'll continue to be. Yeah.
And as far as the amputees and whatnot go, as we've, or I have probably said too much, the dark humor really can help with that sort of thing. Like, a guy rolls in a wheelchair, and, my standard smart-ass response is, fellas, please, don't get up.
Yeah.
Or I'll go up to somebody who's missing an arm and say, sir, you look stumped. I mean, that's, how you get rid of the original, the large amount of emotional pressure is to start making fun of it but I say that for a reason, not just to make light of something. Did you ever notice that when you really are good at making fun of something, it's less powerful?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you look at just about all the comedians that are very successful comedians, right? What are they mainly always talking about? Regular traumatic shit that happens
How
to us
fucked up they are.
Yeah, talking about getting slapped on stage by somebody, right?
Right? About, how, what's his name? Kevin Hart, when he came out with all of his series, and he was like, my dad was a coked crackhead, and he'd come to my school plays and be like, oh, you ever seen a big black swinging dick? You gonna see what? That was trauma for him, right? And now he makes millions of dollars talking about that childhood trauma, and we learn to cope with traumas throughout that humor. But eventually, you also have to learn how to cope with that trauma without it as well. Because you can't just use one mechanism.
Sure, but it takes the edge off initially, doesn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need multiple crutches.
Yeah, no, for sure, and and that's absolutely,
If we're
you're
going to get a
absolutely.
leg up on it.
But you're absolutely right,
Yeah.
because if we don't, well, for me personally, I can't speak for everyone else, but I mean, there's a reason why this last time I've stayed off the bottle for so long, and stayed away from drugs for so long, and rightfully so, have locked up my guns when I haven't felt so safe, and told my wife, hey, here's the key, change the combo lock on
Change
that
combo.
thing. I need to stay away from them for about 2 weeks, and we talk and get through that emotion. Um, there's nothing wrong, and that's how we keep each other alive, and 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 yes, dark humor definitely helps out in those moments for sure, 100%. Some people might not understand it, but like we said, when we talk about those that died on the battlefield, some days it's we would much rather remember all the stupid, idiotic, dumb bullshit that we did in the barracks, getting drunk, you know, um, whether you are stationed in Camp Lejeune or Pendleton or Okinawa, everyone has their drunk night barracks, whether you're going through a hurricane or an earthquake or whatever, right? And so we choose to remember all those stupid, idiotic moments in our life vice that one horrific day. And even though the conversation might start off with, talk to him about Chuck or Michael Bitz or Picorni or Garcia and all those other guys that we lost, the first 10 minutes might be somber, but look at where we're at now after an hour, right? Laughing,
Yeah.
joking, smiling. I can talk about Mike and Chuck very calmly now, very much so, great loving men that I miss today, just as much as when they passed away 20 years ago. I miss them just as much.
Yeah.
The pain is still there. It's just I have been blessed to have been given an opportunity in life to develop skill sets to help me work through those hard situations, to be able to find my own battle team, so that when that wolf that comes knocking at my door, I can pick up my red phone and call my battle team, right? Which involves you two, which involves my wife, which involves so many Marines from An Nasiriyah, that I send a blast text or email or whatever I need to, or a secret code on Facebook that only certain members know, right? And I got my phone ringing off the hook. But it takes a lot of work, individual work, right? To form that team, and to be comfortable enough to look at a brother or sister in the face and say, I'm not well today. And if you don't come help me today, I might not be here tomorrow for you to help me. Um, and that
Well,
takes a lot of courage, a lot of guts to do that, man.
it takes a lot of strength.
Yeah.
Yep.
And because Luis, I admire you for being able to do that. Because, honestly, when I've had people tell me, like, hey, man, how you doing? And just yeah, I'm doing all right. Or I try to say I'm not doing any worse now. But, people like, just give me a call, man, you ever need it. And I always say, yeah, I will. I know I won't.
Right.
I'm not in that place. Plus, it's not, the people that I was with, that's from a long time. That's from 32 years ago now, right?
Right.
It's been a while. We haven't seen each other. But I admire that 20 years later that you've got the strength to be able to, and the humility, I guess, to be able to say, no, I need to let somebody know. Because I don't do that. I think a lot of people don't. I mean, when I told people that I almost didn't make it, through 2021, and the shock on their faces, and I'm like, did you see me in 2021?
Right.
It was like, it was bad, but,
I'm just about
but
the
now
only
I'm talking
one. I'm just about the only one you allow to see you.
Well, you're very persistent, Doc, and that's why.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it, because if it wasn't for you reaching out and going, I haven't heard from you for a while, and when I don't answer that, and you get a hold of one of my kids and say, hey, where's your dad?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Get used to it.
It makes a huge difference.
For the past 18 years, it's been this way. This is going to follow you for the rest of your life. Me.
But But what I wanted to focus on though is that I admire that Luis has got the humility and the strength to do that, and I'm hoping that more people who, learning and knowing what he's been through, and then seeing
Right.
where he's at and what it takes to get there, that they'll do the same. That because it's hard. It's no matter what it is in life, it's hard for people to get over yourself, right?
Oh God, yes. Oh yes.
Yeah, and it's even harder, when it's something you feel you're falling short on, right? Like, I know that other people have got it worse than me. I know that I should get up and just do something, but I can't. And then
Right.
to be able to reach out and take that step and send a code out or an email blast or a message blast to people, that's huge. That's
Well, and talk about humility and all that. I have to be honest. I wish I came up with this great thought on my own, but I didn't. Another great leader who ended up being my guest speaker at my retirement ceremony, Sergeant Matthew Beavers, when I was on Facebook video with, I want to say it was like 21 of us, 22 of us on Facebook video, which was maybe 3 weeks after my suicide. And all of that. And I told him what I was going through. He was the one that looked at me straight in the camera, kind of like I did earlier. And I was like, when Michael Bitz was like, he said that to me in the camera. He said, Doc, he goes, you didn't fight the Battle of An Nasiriyah by yourself, did you? And I said, no. So why the fuck are you fighting this one by yourself? And it was the light
Bullseye.
switch. It was a light switch. I was like, exactly. Why? And Doc Barry's talked about this several times when we have guests on, and we talk about, if you're the only person in a fighting hole and you know you're about to get overran and you're out of ammunition and the only thing you have is a radio and a spoon, what are you going to do? Of course you're going to call for backup. So why don't we do that in everyday life? It's such an easy concept, but also at the same time a hard thing to put into practice when it comes to, for me personally, to my mental health, because there's being raised as a very prideful Hispanic male, don't show emotions, that old type of mentality thinking.
yeah.
And that's why I don't like the word hero. That's why I think it's an overrated word. It's used way too loosely for, nothing against any reality star or any famous movie star or famous, professional athlete. But it's I'm glad that you get paid a lot of money for something that you do really, really well. But I'm sorry, I mean, unless you're doing something like Ashton Kutcher, who a lot of people don't know has even stood in front of Congress against child abduction and child sex trafficking. To me, him being a movie star doesn't make him a hero. The fact that he's fighting for child sex exploitation against it, that's, to me, makes him a hero. So
Yeah, he put himself out there.
yeah, so for me, that's why I hate the word hero. I don't use it for myself. If people want to put that title on me, that's fine. I don't take disrespect from it, but you will never hear me refer to myself. I will very rarely even refer to other Navy Cross recipients or Air Force or Cross recipients as heroes as well. And the reason being is because regardless, like Nate said earlier today, is my memory of that day is ingrained lifetime. I'll always relive that day as if I was there. I will always relive it. So the reason why I hate the term hero when it's put on me is because I say it a lot, is when I remember that day, all I remember is me doing what I was tasked to do, and that is to take care of my Marines when they got sick, wounded, or injured. I don't feel like I did anything spectacular that day. I did the very basic medical treatment to take care of many Marines as possible. That was
Hey,
my
Luis.
job. Hold on, Doc. That's what my title as a hospital corpsman is. So when people say you went above and beyond, in my mind, no, I didn't. I did exactly what I think was the appropriate thing that every hospital corpsman should do, And that's why our legacy is so big in the Corps. That's why the Marine Corps is known as the most fierce fighting force of the United States military, even though it's now that we have Space Force, we can't no longer say it's the smallest, but it was the smallest, direct force of that we had ever. And I mean, they got the name Devil Dogs for a reason, right? But go ahead, Doc. What's up?
So anyway, Luis, do you remember the very first conversation we had face-to-face, that 2-hour video chat?
I don't even remember how we started this conversation an hour.
I know. I like when Doc, he always says, "Do you remember?" And I'm like, "You don't need to start statements."
Oh, okay. Let me refresh your memory.
All right.
This is fucked. I love it. Now, you and I had a very a heart-to-heart, very frank discussion the first time we met, so to speak, on screen. And I told you, and you agreed with this at the time, let's see if you still do. I said to you, I don't think heroes exist. I don't. However, I do think that people are capable of incredibly heroic things. Yeah. And you agreed with that. And I went on to expand a little bit. When we think of what a hero is, it's the way it's framed from the get-go is completely fucked, because what comes to mind is the knight in shining armor up on the pedestal and saves the day. It doesn't go down that way. Somebody who does heroic things is a mixed bag. They're complete shitbirds in some areas of their lives and absolutely brilliant in others, and they happen to be at the right place at the right time, and they know what to do. Right. And lo and behold. Now, what was I saying?
Damn, Doc just called you a shitbird, man.
Right.
You've called yourself worse, asshole.
I know he had. I was messing with you.
Yeah, I know. But also, now, what was I saying a few minutes, or I've said on other occasions, how we frame what a hero is up on a pedestal. The minute you put somebody on a pedestal, what do? You dehumanize them.
Yeah.
But, and I was glad you brought that up, Doc Berry, because I don't know if you've said it before around me. I can't recall it. But I was thinking about what Luis was talking about. I said and this makes sense with what you just said. For those Marines that were laying there in the middle of all that shit in 2003, looking up, wondering how the hell is anybody going to get out to me, and then they see your face over them. Yeah, to them. They were seeing you being heroic. To them, from their perspective, when they probably thought that there was no way anyone was going to get out there to them, and that, I understand what you mean completely by saying you don't consider yourself a hero, but I agree completely with Doc Berry. You did heroic things, for sure.
And okay, so to that point, yes, there is a certain level of understanding that. Even when I read the citation, if I just close my eyes and don't read my name on it, I can see how, oh wow, yeah, that person did, a very heroic thing on that day. And I think it's just, for me, it was more like, even though I did a heroic thing on that day, maybe because I just led a life of being a drunk for the next 17 years, of the woe is me, I still don't feel worthy of it because look at all these NJPs I've had, or look at this or this mistake or that mistake. I shouldn't be wearing this. All that negative talk is what has led me to the belief of me not being worthy enough of carrying that Navy Cross, and it's theirs, and I still do believe it's theirs. But I can see, yes, I can see how you can read that citation and question it as well and be like, damn, why isn't that a Medal of Honor? But like you said, Nate, I lived it in real time. So for me, like I didn't do anything spectacular. I consider my Marines brave, just like they probably consider me brave. Like, when I told Junior Corpsman, in Iraq, the first time I went out there, all I carried was a 9mm pistol. We didn't have M4s or M16s. They didn't give Doc that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they're like, what the hell?
We didn't have body armor.
Yeah, they're like, what the hell? They actually send, I'm like, yeah, they actually send us out there like that, right? And that was our the way we were trained back then. And so when people associate heroism and the Battle of An Nasiriyah, March 23rd, I always say, but these 18 men, like, I didn't have to face the fire. Does that make sense?
I understand where you're
You
coming
know,
from.
like, those men
They
faced it. They fucking, when lead came down, they faced it. I didn't really face it. My vision was so pinpointed on those casualties that I had no idea what was going on around me. So when that's why I dissect that citation so much sometimes, and I know that's something I need to stop doing. But when that citation says calmly and methodically and all these fancy fucking Ivy League words, I'm like, no, the fuck not, man. Like, I was
I beg your pardon.
I was scared shitless. You know, some of those decisions that got me awarded the Navy Cross was because I was scared. I didn't want to sit in a ditch, so I'm going to move my casualties to the evacuation vehicle. That wasn't a thoughtful, a methodical fucking, thought. That was me, oh shit, I'm going to get killed if I stay here, so that's what I, in my mind, perceive making a decision out of fear, which is good because fear, to a certain extent, keeps us alive, right?
But it took courage to act on that decision out of fear.
Right, and that's why I say, like, I can dissect it so much, and we can go back and forth on this for
I know.
till the earth ends.
Here's something to think about, man. You don't have to spend the rest of your life trying to sanctify it, right? You don't have to try to earn it after the fact.
Yeah.
You did it already. It's already been done. Regardless of the ways you wish you would have handled yourself since then, you don't have to sanctify it.
Yeah.
It's you already gave it. It's already been given and it's done. Right.
Let me just
let yourself off the hook.
Yes. Let me just throw something else here at you. My favorite picture of you, Luis, when you're on duty, is you got your blues on, and instead of looking straight into the camera, you got a shitting grin on your face, and your head is tipped forward, like the photographer didn't snap at exactly the right moment. And the smile is rough, it's raw, and it's honest. And I'll tell you, and I'll find it. I can find it online and send it to you. That's what I want an autograph on. But I'll tell you why I like it, because it's not posed. It's not fake. It's not a costume. It's you looking down into a fighting hole with a stupid-ass goddamn grin on your face, saying something like, all right, which one of you assholes ordered the fucking pepperoni pizza?
Yeah.
That's the Luis I like.
I always have trouble seeing pictures of him in uniform because I never knew him in uniform. I know him like this. And when I look back and I see those pictures of you, I'm like, my God, I can see Luis in there, but let me get a Sharpie and mark it up a little bit.
But that's my favorite one of you, because it was supposed to be a posed picture that became real, and that's now I'm just projecting, but
I'd like
it's
to
like
see that one. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'm going to find it, and I'm going to find it and get it out, and I'm going to send it to the both of you.
Yeah,
but that one is just great.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's just wild to think of, how long ago it seems or can seem sometimes, but yet how so easily it just seems like it was a breath away, But yeah, I mean,
I don't think that goes away, man. I think if you feel it now at 20 years, it'll always be that way. Because I'm sure there are people who see my Facebook page and are like, this fucking guy again? Every February, really? Desert Storm? Because they don't understand it. It just feels like
I found it, and I stand corrected. You're not in blues in this one, but it's got that grin on you, and I'm going to send it to the both of you. It's fucking great.
Is it the one that I'm in Iraq, wear my body armor with my M9 pistol?
Nope. Hang on.
Oh, I thought it was that one.
We're going to have to post it in the comments.
I know.
So
and I'm going to
we're talking about.
I'm working on it right now, even as we speak. Anyway.
Luis, it's also every February is a friend of mine. I was in Okinawa, and we were getting ready. We were cleaning the house up, getting ready to pack up to move out to Monterey. And so we left Monterey at the end of March. And this was February 17th. And, you know, my second wife at the time, she like comes rushing into the room. And she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, Nate, she's like, what's Brandon's last name again? I'm like, Dronette. And she's like, oh my gosh. And she showed me the article. This friend of mine, his helicopter went down in Djibouti. You know, and unfortunately him and a bunch of others, you know, lost their lives that same day. But every February, when I think about him I still think about him, he and I laughing and shooting the shit in the field at the basic school on the day that we volunteered to carry the 240 Golf because we were the Mustangs. And then I remember the moment we looked at each other and we were just like, fuck. Did we really volunteer for this shit?
Right.
You know, we were the oldest guys. He and I believe, were the two oldest guys in the company. We were 30 years old, and these other kids from the Naval Academy are 22 years old. It's peak fitness, and we volunteered to carry the 240 Golf. But every year, I think back to that and I do the math, and I'm like, shit. This year, I'm like, it's been 17 years. Like, it doesn't feel like 17 years, you know.
So I found the picture. I found the picture and texted it to the both of you.
Doc has good segues.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, I have all the subtlety of a community bedpan.
Thank you so much for giving me a good, comfortable place in my headspace in order to be able to even go through tonight's interview, right? And like I said, to anyone out there that, you know, feels like they're weak, feels that no one but themselves goes through this, you truly are not alone. You will find so many friends that will help advocate for you, that will make sure that you're here. I think that's one of the hardest things I had to let go was the stigma. That, oh, now my friends, because I admitted that I'm PTSD, you know, I'm depressed, I could tried suicide, alcoholic, all this, that they're going to look down on me. But, I mean, you two gentlemen tonight have been a testimony to the fact that, if anything, it's been the opposite. When I finally opened my mouth and spoke who I really was, is when I really felt people really respected me. You know, people really understood who I was now. You know, when I try to fake the funk and play the Navy games and try to push all those demons down, that's when you got a very ungenuine, very robotic style of me. And now I'm no longer that. So I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for helping me get here, too. It's you guys have known me. We're going on, what now, a year, a little bit over a year now?
Yeah, a little over a year.
And, you know, I definitely, like I said, I mean, this podcast has saved my life too. You know, I'm not saying like I said, oh, I'm going to kill myself today, but I have a podcast, so let me just wait till afterwards. But like I said, when those intrusive thoughts come in, and then just going in and talking to you guys, either before we start recording or after, or with our guest on there, you know, has been very therapeutic, where that thought process has washed away, you know. And so I'll deal with that thought when it comes again. But, you know, so that's
would you ever thought a year ago if somebody said, yeah, you're going to do this webcast and it's going to be some of the best 2 hours of your week?
No, yeah, exactly, right.
Same here. I'd have been like, okay, whatever, man.
So, but yeah, there is truth in that opening your mouth brings healing. There is truth in the fact that you are not weak if you speak up about your mental health. There is truth that you will find more friends and loved ones coming to your aid than running away from you. And in those times, you will truly find who is your family. And with that being said, my brothers, if you don't mind, I would like to name off my brothers that I lost 20 years ago. And
For a man.
Sergeant Michael Bitz, Lance Corporal Thomas A. Blair, Lance Corporal Brian Roy Busing, Lance Corporal Tamarillo D. Burkett, Corporal Camerfood A. Chanawangsi, Lance Corporal Donald J. Clyde, Lance Corporal David Fribley, Corporal Jose Garibay, Private Jonathan Gifford, Corporal George Gonzalez, Private Nolan Hutchings, Staff Sergeant Philip Jordan, Lance Corporal Patrick R. Nixon, Second Lieutenant Frederick Pokorny, Sergeant Brendan Reese, Corporal Randall Rossacker, and last but not least, our brother Lance Corporal Thomas J. Slocum. My brothers, may you be at peace. May you be resting now. Hold a spot for me and our other brothers that are still down here. For us, hold a drink for us. I will break sobriety the day that I meet y'all again. It's the only way I'll ever break sobriety. Hold a small little place for us degenerate fucks that are still left down here. I love you, boys. I always will. Whether I knew you a week or I knew you 3 years before that day. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Amen.
My brothers, I appreciate your time. Thank you for bringing me this place of comfort once again. And until the next one, as we say.
Yep.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
To us all.
Talk to you again later, man.